Welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a set of notes today that honestly read like, like a psychological thriller disguised as a diary.
They really do, yeah. It is a wild ride.
Right. Our mission today is to explore the observations of two students. They go by Kesser and Steen, and you really get a sense of who they are through this. They're taking a nature and innovation class together,
Hmm.
and they've basically been documenting their day-to-day lives, which sounds pretty mundane at first until you start to see the patterns they uncover.
Exactly. The patterns are what make this so fascinating.
We are going to start by looking at this incredibly bizarre internet debate over something called seed snail roll pots, or sniggelpotter in Danish.
Right, a very niche gardening tool.
Super niche. But by the end of this deep dive, we are going to be standing downwind of a massive toxic plastic factory fire.
Yeah, and I think I think that jump from arguing about tiny gardening tools on social media to suddenly dealing with an acute environmental crisis is what makes these notes so
It
compelling.
gives you whiplash.
It really does. Kesser and Steen managed to capture this very specific modern neurosis.
Yeah.
They are documenting how we obsess over these tiny, highly controllable microenvironments, like the exact material of a seed pod.
Right, cardboard versus plastic.
Exactly, because ultimately, we feel entirely helpless about the massive, uncontrollable macro environments we actually live in.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the notes begin in the comment section of a YouTube video, which, is usually where logic goes to die anyway.
Oh, absolutely. The absolute bottom of the barrel for nuanced debate.
Exactly. So Kesser and Steen were watching these online gardening gurus fiercely debate the merits of cardboard versus plastic snail-shaped plant pots for starting seeds.
Hmm.
And the students point out that the argument just instantly derails. It stops being about agriculture and turns into this fascinating display of our complete inability to communicate basic facts.
They use a brilliant analogy in the notes to explain this epistemological flaw. They suggest imagining a forum where someone posts a very simple, factual statement. Just something like, my car is blue.
Just a completely neutral statement.
Right. In a functional communication space, that statement is just accepted as a piece of data. Okay, your car is blue. Moving on.
Yeah.
But on social media, the structure of the platform actually incentivizes this bizarre kind of oppositional projection.
Because someone will immediately reply to that post arguing that red cars exist.
Yes.
As if the original poster was denying the existence of the color red just by stating their car was blue.
It is the classic philosophical problem of the black swan, but entirely weaponized for engagement. The existence of a red car doesn't negate the blue car.
No, of course not.
Yet online, it is presented as this devastating counterargument. Or they take it a step further into the absurd.
Oh, right, the hidden agenda assumption.
Yes. Another commenter will assume that because the person specifically mentioned their blue car, they are secretly implying that blue cars are physically larger or morally superior or faster.
They project an entire hidden agenda onto a simple statement of fact. It's wild. And Kesser and Steen note that perhaps in the replier's specific neighborhood, all the red cars just happen to be compact models.
Right.
So that person takes their highly localized anecdotal experience and projects it as a universal law for everyone else.
It demonstrates how terrible we generally are at formulating a basic hypothesis, let alone actually testing one.
Which fundamentally breaks how we consume information, especially when you factor in the monetization of these platforms.
Oh, the monetization changes everything.
Right, because you, as the audience, will watch a creator plant a seed in a cardboard pot. You see a slick ad roll before the video, and you make this false leap of logic that monetization equals scientific expertise.
Which is a huge trap.
Being able to successfully market a video about a garden does not mean the creator understands the actual biology of the garden.
The students actually refer to this specific kind of online chatter as a mistusnack.
Which translates from Danish to wives' tales, right? Or just baseless gossip.
Exactly. Baseless gossip. You have an entire ecosystem of people making claims with absolutely no rigorous scientific background.
Yeah, they film these little scientific experiments on their nice, clean kitchen counters. But those experiments wouldn't survive 10 seconds of scrutiny in an actual laboratory setting.
What's fascinating here is how the core metric of success goes completely unquestioned by everyone involved in the debate.
Yes, the speed aspect.
Right. The prevailing rumor driving the whole algorithm is that seeds will sprout faster in these snail pots.
Faster is always better, obviously.
That's what people assume. People spend hours drafting these multi-paragraph arguments about seed germination speed. They throw around all this pseudo-knowledge to prove their point.
But nobody stops to ask the fundamental biological question, why is fast actually better for the plant?
Exactly. We just assume speed is the ultimate goal because we view nature through the lens of modern convenience.
We want next-day delivery on our tomato sprouts.
We really do. But a fast-sprouting seed might actually have a weaker root system. It might be way more susceptible to disease.
The internet echo chamber doesn't care about the long-term health of the plant. It only cares about the immediate visual gratification of the sprout popping up.
To cut through all of this theoretical noise, Kesser and Steen decided to run a grounded, practical test for their class.
I love this part.
Yeah, they stripped away all the trendy gadgets and just went back to basic botany. They took a batch of tomato seeds and simply soaked them in water for proper rehydration before sowing them in standard soil.
Real soil, not a cardboard roll.
Right. And to create a control group that perfectly mocks the internet's lack of rigor, they took the leftover seeds and just left them sitting on a wet napkin on a cake plate.
On a cake plate, it is a very literal demonstration of form over function, just slapping seeds on a fancy plate.
And the results were predictably boring, which is honestly how real science usually works.
Yeah, real science isn't always a viral moment.
Right. The seeds that were properly hydrated and planted in actual soil are days ahead of the ones languishing on the cake plate.
And the boys even playfully plugged their own tomato plant video in their notes, which I thought was a nice touch.
It is. A little nod to the fact that they are participating in the exact same digital ecosystem they're critiquing.
But they proved their point. Fundamental plant care beats whatever cardboard or plastic gadget happens to be trending this week.
And that practical experiment actually led them to brainstorm their own design ideas for the innovation side of their coursework.
Right, because they are in an innovation class.
Exactly. They started looking at the mechanics of these snail pots and how they might be improved upon, or at least understood differently.
And this is where Steen pitches a concept to Kesser that is just wonderfully tactile. He suggests taking a strip of cardboard, laying down a thin layer of soil, and rolling it up tight. And he dubs this creation a delicious mud remonce.
Which is such a great phrase. For anyone unfamiliar with Danish baking, remonce is the filling used in traditional pastries. It's this thick paste of butter, sugar, and cinnamon that gets layered and rolled into the dough. Oh, amazing. But equating layers of dirt and wet cardboard to the rich layers of a pastry is a very creative way to visualize the physical structure of the soil.
It makes the abstract concept of planting incredibly tangible for people.
It really does. It also brings up a concept they refer to in the notes as root trainers.
Right.
These are products designed to keep plants in pots for a longer period by guiding the roots downward. You might use a tall, narrow rose pot for a vine cutting, for instance.
But the real humor in their notes comes from the linguistic crossover in Danish here.
Yes. The Danish word for this kind of agricultural pot training is potty training. The joke, of course, being that potty training is the exact same word used for potty training a toddler.
The boys lean heavily into the deadpan humor of this. They clarify they aren't offering childcare advice, but the analogy holds up perfectly.
It really does.
When a toddler is physically capable of walking and communicating, it is time to transition out of diapers. You wouldn't keep a child in a diaper just because it is convenient for you.
Right, that would be terrible.
Exactly. And similarly, a plant cannot stay in its little cardboard training pot forever. The pot is a temporary vehicle, not a permanent habitat. Eventually, the plant has to face the harsh reality of the actual ground.
It is a sharp analogy because it highlights our tendency to artificially contain growth. We like the seed in the pot because it sits neatly on our windowsill.
Where we have total control.
Yes, we can control the temperature, the water, the light. Moving the plant to the garden introduces variables we can't control: weather, pests, soil quality.
And this reluctance to engage with uncontrollable natural context leads directly into their next observation. It's about how people communicate, or rather, fail to communicate.
Right.
This brings us to a story Kesser and Steen documented about a rather confusing interaction. Someone approached them asking if they knew a driving instructor who speaks Norwegian.
Which on the surface sounds like a straightforward logistical question.
Sure.
But when you apply any critical thought to it, the premise completely collapses.
Yeah.
Kesser and Steen break down the absurdity of it. First, Norwegian and Danish are incredibly similar.
Yeah, Norwegian is essentially a dialect of Danish.
Exactly. So if you live in Denmark, finding someone who speaks Norwegian to teach you a highly technical skill is an incredibly narrow and unnecessary filter.
You're just making it harder on yourself. And second, the person didn't consider the broader context of their own life. If you are living in Denmark and need to take official instruction, perhaps asking where you could learn Danish would solve both your immediate problem and your long-term integration into the community.
Right. Miss the forest for the trees.
Yeah,
And third, they completely failed to specify what kind of license they're even trying to get.
that's the best part.
They asked for an instructor, assuming the boys would automatically know if they meant a license for a passenger car, a motorcycle, a heavy-duty truck, or a commercial bus.
Think about the last time you sent a quick message at work, using 3 acronyms, assuming everyone on the email chain knew exactly which specific sub-project you were talking about.
We all do it.
We all do it. We confuse our highly specific personal perspective with a universal truth. The person asking about the driving instructor assumed their immediate needs and their specific mother tongue were the default setting for everyone else in the conversation.
It is the blue car problem all over again, applied to real-world logistics. You just cannot assume everyone shares your context.
No.
As Kesser and Steen point out in their notes, you can't start at Adam and Eve every single time you want to explain how to plant a row of radishes.
Right. You have to establish a baseline of common ground, but you also have to recognize when you've drifted completely away from common sense.
And that theme of drifting away from natural processes provides a perfect transition in their notes.
It really does.
Yeah.
Because we are moving from the obsession over snail pots in the garden to the reality of actual snail cakes in the kitchen.
Snail cakes being the literal translation for cinnamon rolls.
Right. The notes introduce us to Kesser's grandmother, Oma, and her traditional homemade cinnamon rolls that she bakes every now and then.
The boys use Oma's kitchen to further explore this disconnect between internet theory and physical reality. They point out that Kesser has stood in that kitchen and watched Oma bake these rolls 100 times.
He's practically absorbed the process through osmosis.
Exactly. He knows what the dough should feel like. He knows how the remoulade should smell. He doesn't need a written recipe.
But Steen is on the outside of that context. He has only ever experienced the end result, which is eating the finished cinnamon roll.
The best part.
Right. But if Steen wanted to recreate it, he would need an Excel spreadsheet.
He really would.
He needs the exact measurements for the flour. He needs the precise ratio of butter to sugar for the remoulades, the exact oven temperature, the specific baking time. He needs the raw data because he lacks the instinct.
And the notes predict that the second you try to codify Oma's instinctive process and share that exact recipe online, the internet will immediately ruin it.
Oh, instantly.
The chain of logic will shatter just like the debate over the cardboard pots.
Someone in the comments will complain about the sugar content, entirely ignoring the fact that it is literally a dessert.
Right.
Someone else will start a fierce debate about the foundational dough. They will demand to know if it is a simple bun dough that you can just roll out on the counter, or if Oma is secretly using a complex, multi-layered pastry dough, like a Wiener Breedsdej.
Right, where you have to meticulously fold and chill butter into the layers over a period of hours.
So what does this all mean? The students use this hypothetical baking debate to point out a severe cultural amnesia. We spend all our energy arguing over the theoretical layers of a pastry dough online while completely forgetting how to actually bake.
And look at the oven analogy they make. Just as it would be objectively ridiculous to leave Oma's cakes in the oven all summer long, it is equally ridiculous to leave baby plants in cardboard snail pots indefinitely.
At some point, the theory has to become practice. But the internet comment sections never discuss the actual practice. Do you plant the entire cardboard clump directly into the soil? Do you unroll it carefully in a trench? Do you wash the dirt away and transplant the bare roots?
The online world argues endlessly about the superiority of the pot, but entirely misses the reality of the planting.
Kesser and Steen conclude that this bizarre behavior stems from the fact that modern society, particularly in urban environments, has drifted incredibly far away from the physical realities of organic backyard gardening and real cooking.
We have traded the messy, unpredictable process of growing real food for the sterile convenience of sliding a frozen metal tray into a microwave or pulling up to a window for a Happy Meal.
We want the instant gratification of the sprout and the instant gratification of the meal without understanding the dirt or the dough.
And here's where it gets really interesting and, frankly, incredibly grim.
Yeah, the tone shift is intense.
You're reading through these notes, you're chuckling at the analogies about muddermonts and Norwegian driving instructors, and then the tone fractures entirely.
The notes suddenly shift to an urgent, real-time documentation of a crisis. They write, close doors and windows, stop the ventilation.
The sudden pivot is jarring. They aren't baking cinnamon rolls in Oma's kitchen anymore. The burning smell isn't sugar and butter. It is a massive pile of industrial waste.
A real-life toxic fire has broken out at a plastic factory in the neighboring town, and it is burning uncontrollably through the night.
All those theoretical debates about whether plastic or cardboard is better for a tiny tomato seed are instantly overshadowed by thousands of pounds of actual plastic literally going up in flames just a few miles away.
Kesser and Steen document how the toxic smoke from this fire is actively blowing over their city. It is drifting directly over the local schools and the kindergartens.
What is truly terrifying about this section of the notes is the psychological analysis of the community's reaction.
Yeah.
Kesser and Steen highlight how deeply normalized this environmental hazard has become. This isn't a once-in-a-century catastrophe for them. These small chemical accidents and toxic episodes happen with alarming regularity.
The notes describe how society has simply accepted this as the background noise of modern life. Yes, when the wind blows the wrong way, the local kindergarten initiates a lockdown protocol.
Right.
They call the parents for emergency pickup. The parents feel a brief spike of panic. They rush to grab their kids. They close their windows at home, and then they just go back to arguing on the internet.
The acute panic fades right back into chronic apathy.
The visual Kesser and Steen paint of their morning commute is haunting. Picture these two students on their bikes, riding to their nature and innovation class. They pull out their phones, not to check YouTube, but to check the real-time wind direction on a weather app.
And they note, with a kind of dark relief, that the wind is blowing north today. Fewer people live in that direction, but the toxic smoke is still drifting directly out over the natural landscape.
They are checking the wind direction to see if they are going to breathe in burning plastic on their way to school.
It is a dystopian reality sitting right underneath the surface of a normal Tuesday.
Yeah. The fire will eventually burn itself out. The fire department will leave. The immediate visible plume of black smoke will clear from the skyline. But then what?
This raises an important question, and it is the exact question Kesser and Steen used to connect this crisis back to their earlier observations about the garden.
Right.
The smoke clears, but the physics of the fire remain. What happens to the invisible soot? What happens to the microscopic toxic particles, the heavy metals, the biohazards that were lofted into the atmosphere?
They don't just vanish.
No, they settle. They fall like invisible snow over that entire quadrant of the city.
They settle directly onto the very dirt where children are playing during recess. They settle onto the soil in the backyards where people are trying to grow their organic vegetables.
The exact same vegetables that people were just spending hours online debating how to properly start in an eco-friendly cardboard snail pot.
It creates a chilling juxtaposition. The students realize the profound absurdity of the situation.
We will meticulously curate a 2-inch microenvironment for a single tomato seed, fiercely defending our choice of biodegradable cardboard to strangers on the internet, while simultaneously ignoring the macro environment that is actively raining toxic industrialized ash onto that exact same tomato plant.
Biking through that smoke, checking the wind on their phones, it puts their entire hood and their entire future into a very stark perspective.
The illusion of control is completely shattered.
All the image snack, all the wives' tales and internet arguments about optimizing seed growth are rendered entirely trivial when you realize the soil itself is being quietly poisoned by a normalized industrial disaster.
It is a profound realization for two students to articulate. They have successfully identified a major psychological coping mechanism.
Yeah, we micromanage.
Exactly. We micromanage the tiny, safe details of our lives. The recipe for the dough, the material of the pot, the color of the car, because it distracts us from the massive, systemic, and seemingly insurmountable dangers that exist right next door.
No wonder Kesser and Steen conclude their notes by stating they are bypassing the internet entirely and heading straight to Oma's house after school.
I don't blame them.
For a comforting cup of tea and hopefully a real cinnamon roll. After facing that kind of existential reality check, you need something grounding and authentic.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Kesser and Steen's notes serve as a masterclass in the necessity of applied critical thinking.
Absolutely.
It is one thing to use critical thought to evaluate a useless gardening hack on YouTube, or to dissect the flaws in online communication. But it is infinitely more important to apply that same critical lens to our physical reality.
We need it to question the safety of our local environment and to recognize when completely unacceptable hazards have been dangerously normalized by our communities. We have covered an incredible amount of ground today. We started with two students dissecting the illogical echo chambers of social media, where people project their own narrow contexts onto the world, arguing over the language of car colors and the exact hydration of a seed. We transitioned into the loss of tangible skills, mourning the fact that we've traded Oma's intuitive baking and real backyard dirt for microwaves and online pedantry.
And we ended with the sobering physical reality of environmental pollution literally raining down on their daily commute.
It is a stark reminder that the internet is not a substitute for the physical world, and arguing about the theory of nature does not protect you from the reality of it.
Well said.
Kesser and Steen definitely gave us a lot to process today. But before we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over on your own. Think about your own daily habits and the things that stress you out. Considering everything we discussed today, why are we as individuals and as a society so eager to passionately debate and aggressively micromanage the tiny controlled environments we create for ourselves, while remaining so deeply apathetic to the massive, uncontrollable, and toxic environmental hazards that are happening just outside our windows? Keep asking questions, keep looking at the big picture, and we will catch you next time. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a set of notes today that honestly read like, well, like a psychological thriller disguised as a diary.